Hey, gorgeous. Welcome to Season 2 of the Hormone Puzzle Podcast. I'm your host, Coach Kayla Smith, CEO of the Hormone Puzzle Society, a women's health hub for fertility, hormones, and the business of coaching, creator of the Hormone Puzzle Method, an infertility warrior, two-time boy mom, and women's health expert. This podcast is for women struggling with infertility, painful periods, terrible PMS, or really just any symptom of hormone imbalance that they are ready to eliminate for good. Tune in weekly as we interview amazing experts in the fields of women's health, breaking down those hormone walls, nerding out on nutrition, and having way too much fun. Whether you're beginning your journey or you've been struggling for years, we're going to finally help you put those pieces of your hormone puzzle back together so that you can get pregnant and eliminate those pesky symptoms for good. Are you ready? This season is packed with even more expert guests sharing groundbreaking knowledge, giving you that jolt of energy that you so desperately need, sending you lots of virtual hugs, and inspiring you to take your fertility into your own hands and make that baby. Thank you so much for tuning in. Now let's get started on your road to transformation. On today's show, we have Lauren Curtin. She's a women's health-focused acupuncturist and herbalist. She centers her clinical practice around supporting women navigating their hormones, menstrual cycles, and fertility using a combination of education, all the health info that you did not get in high school, acupuncture, herbal medicine, diet, and lifestyle support. Lauren believes every woman has the right to know her body and how it works and what she can do to optimize not only her reproductive health, but her whole body health. Lauren sees firsthand in clinic every day the dramatic improvements that can be made to reproductive health through simple, inexpensive, non-invasive technique, and firmly believes life-interrupting periods and menstrual cycles can be a thing of the past. Let's welcome Lauren to the show. Hey, Lauren, thank you for joining me. Welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. So tell us a little bit more about you. How did you start working in women's health?
So I actually really just fell into women's health. I started studying Chinese medicine when I was very young. I was 18, I believe, and it was a real choiceless choice. I just kind of fell into Chinese medicine. I always knew from when I was really, really little that I wanted to do something within the health space. I always knew that I wanted to work within natural health. I was thinking maybe a chiropractor when I was little or an osteopath in that type of realm. And then I came across Chinese medicine and really fell in love with it. And I was immediately drawn to it. And it was once I started studying Chinese medicine that I found this whole world of another way to view the menstrual cycle. And I was so fascinated with how we view the menstrual cycle through a Chinese medicine lens and how it's really seen as such an integral part to your overall health and how it can tell us so much about our overall health. And I had never heard that before. I'd never come across that before. And I was actually on the pill whilst I was studying Chinese medicine and learning all of this. And that quickly prompted me to stop the pill because I wanted to start ovulating and start having my cycle, and I knew how important that was for my health. And I've always kind of been drawn to women's health and menstrual cycle health. I was very excited to get my first period when I was 12. I actually couldn't wait for it to come. So I knew all about it and I was very excited. So I was already really keen on focusing on women's health once I started practicing. But I think it was actually when I started practicing, I realized how needed this type of medicine was and this type of approach is because, I really enjoy doing it because I find it really fun and really interesting and really rewarding. But when I started treating women and I was hearing, story after story of women really actually needing this support, that I was like, okay, this is actually really needed. And this is why I keep doing it. Not just because I enjoy it and it's fun. It's because I see so many women are really needing another option than what they're currently being presented with. So that's what keeps me going. When I hear women's stories and I hear the support that they really need, that's what really drives me to keep going.
I love that. And I love Chinese medicine. I'm a huge fan in it. I kind of try to weave it into my practice as much as possible. And
oh, great.
It is so important because it's looking at that root cause instead of just saying, okay, what symptom do you have? Let's fix that. Let's fix why you're having that symptom to begin with. So it's so very important. So tell me a little more for the listeners who don't know, like, what is the difference between Chinese medicine and Western medicine?
Yes, it's a really good question. So there's a few different ways to look at it, but I approach it from the perspective that Chinese medicine was, first established thousands of years ago. Mm-hmm. So we use a lot of different terminology, and we look at the body in a really different way compared to Western medicine, because this was like pre-modern science and pre-surgeries and things like that, and pre even knowing what hormones were. So we don't actually talk about hormones in such a specific way in Chinese medicine because we just didn't have that perspective at that time. But I think the real key distinguishing features between Chinese medicine and Western medicine is what you were mentioning before about the root cause approach. So Chinese medicine really views the body as a whole ecosystem and as a reflection of our environment around us, and that we are very connected to the natural world, and like the earth goes through seasons, so does our body. Mm-hmm. And our body relates to our external environment. But whenever something comes up within our health, whenever we get signs and symptoms, we really view it as something deeper going on within the body's internal balance, and that there's something actually off within balance. Mm-hmm. So we would see, in Western medicine, we kind of see health as just the absence of disease or pathology. Whereas Chinese medicine, we go beyond that. We say, well, it's not just not being sick, it's actually being really healthy and really vibrant and feeling great, not just not having a disease. Whereas from a Western medicine approach, it's very much symptom focused, like you mentioned. So if someone has a symptom, you might be given a medication to get rid of the symptoms so that you're no longer in pain or suffering, but it may not actually be exploring what's causing that to come up in the first place. I think now more functional medicine is overlapping a bit with Chinese medicine in a good way, in that it's more root cause focused and trying to actually understand why something is coming up for a person. And we're really wanting to figure out what is changing someone's homeostasis, because we think when we're in homeostasis, we're very nice and healthy, nothing, no symptoms are coming up, everything is flowing quite smoothly, especially when it comes to the menstrual cycle. Mm-hmm. And so if something isn't flowing smoothly, we can say, okay, well, what's causing that to manifest in the first place? And we really incorporate things like diet and nutrition and lifestyle. And, we look at sleep and we look at digestion and stress levels. So it's not just bad luck if you get sick. There's a lot of other things that we can do to support the body back into balance.
Gotcha. And I think that's a really important distinction to make with fertility, because a lot of times we try to treat fertility as, infertility. We try to treat the symptom of that with maybe a procedure or a prescription, and not necessarily like, why are you having infertility in the first place? Our bodies are made to make a baby. So what's the reason behind that? So I love that, we're talking about Chinese medicine, and kind of, I feel like it relates really well with the listeners of this show.
Totally. I think fertility is one of the perfect examples of that, because say if a woman is experiencing like low progesterone or something like that, instinctive approach isn't to just say, okay, well, let's give you progesterone to make up for it. We would be thinking, okay, why is your progesterone not optimal? What's causing it to not be secreted in large quantities? And are there some simple things that we can do to help encourage its natural production rather than just giving it topically or internally or something like that?
Exactly. I love that. And I just talked to a client about this earlier, and I'm like, you can make progesterone naturally. There's things that you can encourage your body to make it naturally. You don't just have to go straight to supplements. So I love
Yeah.
it saying that. Yeah. So important. So let's talk about the menstrual cycle a little bit. Tell me, what is a healthy menstrual cycle? What should that look like?
So from a Chinese medicine perspective, we really pay attention to several different cycle parameters. So the first thing that we look at is the actual bleed. So what's the actual quality of the blood? How many days are you bleeding for? So ideally we would be having our period for 4 to 5 days. And the volume is, not too heavy, not too light. It's a nice, easy flow, changing your pad or tampon maybe like every 4 hours. And then we're also looking at the color. So we want to make sure that it's a really nice, fresh, healthy red, and that you're not seeing a lot of brown blood, or you're not seeing a lot of real pale pinky type of blood. So the color is quite important. And then we also look at the consistency of the blood. So we want to pay attention to any clotting or any stringiness within the blood. So ideally it's just flowing quite freely, and it's not overly clotted and clumpy. I'm sure you have as well, many clients that have really struggled with clotting. Mm-hmm. I had one woman in particular who was getting clots the size of her palm.
Oh my goodness.
Giant clots, and we managed to dissolve it. So she's no longer experiencing those, but clots really can go hand in hand with pain a lot of the time. So when women actually passing big clots, that can be quite painful. So it's really important to be looking at the size of the clots and making sure that they're not actually getting too large, and that they're more on the smaller size. Usually like a rice grain size or a pea size is okay. It's when it starts getting a bit bigger than that, we want to make sure that that nothing is going on that could be causing that. And then we also look at things like spotting. So ideally there would be no spotting at all. The period would just start and stop quite succinctly. But for some women, they may experience spotting for days leading into their full flow, and then even days post their full period stopping. And that can indicate a bit of an imbalance as well. So we want to make sure that the period is starting and stopping quite easily and quite obviously. So they would be the main actual bleeding parameters that we look at. And then we would look at the actual cycle. So we would want to make sure that the cycle length is nice and healthy. So we usually want to see it as close to the month mark as possible. So, 28, 30 days, as close as we can get to that is more optimal, because we're wanting to make sure that there is an even amount of time for the follicular phase and then the luteal phase. We don't want to see a really, really long follicular phase and then a short luteal phase. Right. I'm sure your audience is familiar with follicular and luteal, yes, but for anyone that's
cycles,
you talk about it a lot. Okay, good. So yeah, we want to pay attention to that. So it's really common for Chinese medicine practitioners that work in the women's health and fertility space to pay a lot of attention to the basal body temperature chart. So we really want to make sure that women are actually ovulating, and that it's a nice healthy ovulation with a clear temperature shift. And then we also look at the actual pattern of the temperatures, and we want to make sure that the temperatures are nice and smooth and not really zigzagged, because that can indicate a bit of an imbalance. And then also the range in which the temperatures are sitting, we pay a lot of attention to. So they would be the main things. We want to make sure that a woman is ovulating, and that she's ovulating well, and that she's ovulating at a good time in her cycle, and that she's making enough progesterone, which we can see on her basal body temperature chart. And then we want to make sure that the cycle length is quite healthy. It's not getting too long, like past 35 days, or it's not too short, like under a 26-day mark. And that all the bleeding parameters are nice and healthy. And then also we have symptoms. So we want to make sure, a healthy period, ideally there's not really any symptoms at all. You might have a bit of dull heaviness in your tummy, or you might feel a tiny bit of discomfort that you feel like a bit of heat will help. But we don't want to be at the extent that we're experiencing pain that we need to take pain relief for, or that, is taking our breath away or making us double over, or anything in that realm is very much abnormal. the period should very much just come and go with ease. So if there is pain, we definitely pay attention to that. And then also all of the other fun symptoms that can come along with our periods, we would deem as not normal. So for women that are getting really severe breast tenderness, a lot of fluid retention, headaches and migraines, bowel changes, like a lot of women will get pretty severe diarrhea with their period, or they might be constipated, and then skin breakouts, skin issues, all of those kind of symptoms that fall under the PMS umbrella, we would deem as not optimal. So we would want to make sure that we can get someone back into a nice healthy flow where they're not experiencing problematic symptoms that are causing them distress or discomfort, or are stopping them from their living daily life. So we have a very high opinion of what the period can be, and we're pretty optimistic that a lot of women can achieve that, or that they can at least shift the dial more towards optimal than it's staying the same.
I love that. And we talk a lot about that on the show, where I love when a client says, my period came and went. I never even knew it was coming. And then she was gone, and that was it. It was really pleasant and light, and,
Yeah.
So I love that you're talking about this. That was a wonderful description of kind of the flow of things. So thank you for that. Yeah. And so let's talk hormones. How do the hormones play a role in all of that?
Totally. So basically the main source of our hormones is ovulation. So that's one of the main reasons that we want to make sure women are ovulating, is that so that they're making their hormones, their main source of estrogen, testosterone, and then their progesterone. So a lot of women, I think, and I'm sure you experience as well, is that a lot of women aren't aware of that's actually how their main sex hormones are made, is through ovulation. And a lot of women are shocked that if they're on something like the pill, that they're not actually making any of that. Right. And that, they're not making any testosterone, and maybe that's why their libido plummets a bit on the pill. And a lot of women are quite blindsided by that. A lot of women will say, I don't have a libido, I'm on the pill obviously for a reason, but I don't feel like having sex at all. Right. And I'll often say, well, you're not actually making testosterone in any substantial quantity, and that plays a really big role in our libido. So I think a lot of women really need to know that that's how we make our hormones. So, I can take it through the cycle, like after our period, well, with our period, our hormones drop from the previous cycle. And then usually day 2 or 3, our FSH starts to rise. And that is our follicle stimulating hormone to stimulate some follicles on the uterus, on the ovaries, to start growing, that all house an immature egg. And then one will be selected, and then that will be the dominant follicle that will eventually release an egg. And that follicle is what is secreting our main source of estrogen, estradiol. And I think it's wonderful that we can know that estrogen is what stimulates cervical glands to produce cervical mucus. So I often reverse engineer it with women. I'm like, when you're seeing cervical mucus, you can know that if you're seeing that, your cervix is open and the mucus is being stimulated by estrogen. And that can only be happening if there is a follicle growing on one of your ovaries. So if you see that, you know that you're really close to ovulation, most likely.
I love that.
And then,
that's my favorite thing to tell the client, like, look for that fertile mucus. And when you see it, you need to be having sex within 24 hours.
Exactly.
I love it. Yes.
Because a lot of women will, like, especially in terms of fertility, will be looking at the ovulation predictor kits to look at their LH strips. And I had a woman the other day, actually, and she was like, I was seeing mucus, a few days ago, but I've only just started seeing a positive, like, on the LH strips. I'm like, forget about the LH strips. Just go off your cervical mucus, because that's what your body's telling you. Or some women, will base it off what their app is saying.
Right.
And I'm like, forget about the app. Because, that's very changeable. Our bodies are always going to ovulate at a little bit of a different time each cycle, and our app can't predict that. But your body is telling you in real time what is going on. So absolutely pay attention to the cervical mucus. And even in the other way, like women that are avoiding pregnancy might be avoiding having unprotected sex around when the app says, but that may not necessarily be lining up with their actual ovulation, and then they can run into trouble there. Right. So it's important not to put too much stock in that type of technology, because our bodies don't always behave as an algorithm. Shock, massive shock. Our bodies fluctuate, and they respond to our external environment, and we can't always predict that, but our body does give us signs of when we are in our fertile window. And then back to the hormones, after we have ovulated, then progesterone will take over, estrogen should dial down, and then if we're tracking our temperature, that's when we'll see our temperature rise as we are secreting progesterone. So this is a really important time of the cycle, because this is where women will typically experience symptoms if they're having trouble with their progesterone, or if they're having issues metabolizing their estrogen, or a combination of the two. So the luteal phase is a really important time of the cycle to be really honing in on diet and lifestyle, and if you're taking supplements, making sure you're not skipping them in the luteal phase, and with your herbs as well. And then the luteal phase may last for around 2 weeks, and then the hormone levels will drop off, and then that's when we get our period again. So we just go around and around in this nice continuous cycle, hopefully.
Yes, I love it. I love it. So we are going to take a short break to hear a word from our sponsors. And when we come back, we're going to dive into some practical tips on, okay, so we've heard what a healthy menstrual cycle is, talked about hormones, but what are some things that we can do to make sure our hormones are balanced and that our cycle is functioning properly? So we'll talk about all that when we come back.
Hey y'all, it's Coach Kayla here. I hope you are loving this episode as much as I am. We will be back in just a minute, but first, a word from our sponsors. Hey girl, hey, have I got something exciting for you? My new VIP program to help you get pregnant, stay pregnant, and eliminate your hormone symptoms for good. Text the word intensive to 615-257-8855 for all the details. And don't delay, spots are filling fast, and I only have a limited number. You are not going to want to miss out on this amazing new program.
And we are back. Thank you, Lauren, for joining us again.
Thank you so much. I love our conversation, talking about periods.
Me too. I could talk about periods all day long. And I always say, I wish I could go back to middle school and teach our girls this, because I never learned this until I was in my 20s.
I know. Or women that I see, sometimes I see women that are in their 40s.
Oh my goodness.
That don't know anything about ovulation, and they may be trying to conceive, and it's just they're completely shocked at the whole process. And I'm like, wow, we really need to be targeting girls way younger, just so that they're aware of how their bodies work. It's very important.
Exactly. I see the same thing in my practice. People come to me and say, I can't get pregnant. We've struggled for 2 years. Maybe they've done some procedures. And I'll say, okay, let's start tracking. What does your cycle look like? What do you have? Cervical mucus? Are you checking your temperature? None of it. They're not checking any of it. They don't even know if they're having sex at the right time. And I'm like, no.
I know. I had a woman the other day, actually, and I hear this a lot, that women get the advice of having sex every second day of their cycle if they're trying to fall pregnant, and that's on the hopes that they will just catch the egg.
Oh my goodness.
And I'll say to women, I'm like, you don't have to have sex that much,
right.
Mainly because we're not fertile every second day of our whole menstrual cycle, and you can really narrow it in and understand your fertile window, and then you can have a bit of a break after ovulation. And most women are relieved to hear that, because they've been feeling a lot of pressure and feeling like it's not sustainable, which I don't think it is.
No.
Unless your libido is surging, but you don't want to feel that pressure, I think, your whole cycle. And a lot of women find it really empowering and reassuring that you can actually cap your fertile window quite accurately, and understand when you're no longer fertile, and you can just kind of chill a little bit. You can have sex for fun, but if you're trying to conceive, there's not that pressure of thinking, oh, maybe I'm actually fertile now, when you may not be at all. I think that's important info.
Yeah, for sure. Yep. I love it. So let's talk a little bit more practical tips. So what are some, 3 of your top things to kind of make sure that we can have a healthy menstrual cycle, that our hormones can stay balanced?
So from a Chinese medicine perspective, we say that our first 2 tools are diet and lifestyle, and then we bring in acupuncture and herbs as needed. But the basis should really be, what we're nourishing our bodies with, what nutrition we're getting, and then how we're living our life. So it's harder, I think, to have a healthy menstrual cycle if we're extremely stressed, if we're not sleeping very well, if we're kind of burning the candle at both ends. It just makes it more challenging. Some women can do it,
Yeah.
but it's typically harder and typically also not sustainable. So I always like to look at the main pillars of hormonal health with my patients. We really want to look at diet. One of the things that I really emphasize with my patients is opting for organic as much as they can to avoid pesticide, herbicide, like environmental chemical exposures. It's very difficult to avoid that completely, but if we can reduce it, it really does make a difference, especially with things like endometriosis, period pain, most hormonal imbalances, and then even things like egg quality. We know that those types of chemicals play such a big role in fertility. So if we can avoid those chemicals, it really takes the pressure off our body and our cycle. Again, not needing to be perfect though, but really opting for nutrient density so that we're giving our body the fuel to make our hormones. Mm-hmm. I always really emphasize with the women that I work with that ovulation is quite an energy dense process and quite a nutrient dense process. And if we're kind of running on empty, we may not have the resources to devote to ovulation and making really healthy amounts of our hormones. Or even thickening up the uterine lining so that it's a nice, juicy, thick lining for an embryo to implant into. Mm. So we really want to make sure that a woman is really nicely nourished with her food and her nutrition for her menstrual health. And then we also want to look at things like your sleep, making sure that you're going to bed at a really good time and that you're winding down, not having too much exposure to blue light at nighttime, and that you're getting that nice melatonin secretion, which has a really big influence on our hormones and our cycles and also on egg quality. And then we want to look at movement, we want to look at stress levels, but just some like really practical things is that from a Chinese medicine perspective, we really emphasize warmth. So if women can opt for more warm and cooked foods, if they can opt for lots of warming ginger tea and cinnamon tea, that can be really helpful to increase pelvic circulation and also warm up your digestive system, which really helps to support our menstrual cycle and then the menstrual flow and making sure that's really nice and healthy. I have some women in particular that will notice if they drink lots of warm teas, especially ginger tea, before their period, they'll have less clots as opposed to having lots of cold drinks and smoothies, things like that. And then also hot foot baths are wonderful. In Chinese medicine, the 3 main channels, the 3 main organ system channels that influence the menstrual cycle and the reproductive system actually begin at the feet. So we really want to make sure that the feet stay nice and warm because those channels rise up from the toes and they go up the legs and then wrap around the reproductive system and then continue upwards. So if our feet are warm, we all kind of instinctively know that the rest of our body is warm as well. But especially with the hot foot bath, if we're dilating all of those capillaries and all of those blood vessels, it actually helps to dilate the femoral artery. And that is what supplies to the reproductive system as well.
Oh, I love that. So would you do that around your period? You're saying warming foods around the period. Is that kind of like the optimal time to do the foot bath, the warm foods?
Around the period is an amazing time, but you can do this your whole cycle. So you can be doing, like especially around ovulation, it's really good to be doing the hot foot baths then to make sure that there's really good blood flow coming to the ovaries around that time. But the period is a very nice time to do it to help with the flow and then even the days leading into it as well.
Gotcha. Yeah, I recommend for my clients to help with implantation to kind of keep their middle warm and to do a little bit of that foot bath, get that oxygen flowing down there so they have a nice swishy lining. And so I love that.
Yes, we're very big on warmth. We say because if we think about like cold's quite contracting. Like if we feel very cold, we kind of tense up a little bit, and we don't really want a lot of that energy in our body for our menstrual cycle. We want everything to be nice and open and expansive and flowing really freely with the warmth.
Gotcha. And so is there a time when you would recommend like cold foods, like a smoothie or salad? Would that just be the other 2 times of the cycle?
We tend to not recommend them, but I do, yeah.
Okay.
But it depends on the person, you know. If someone's really struggling with their digestive system, if they're getting lots of bloating, then we would say, you know, try to keep cold foods to a minimum and opt for lots of easy to digest warm foods just to take the pressure off. Okay. But if someone has a really robust digestive system and they're quite healthy, then they can probably get away with it. But if they can have the warm foods also throughout the day, then it just helps to make sure that there's not too much cold coming in. But for some women, if they want to have a salad at lunch, I'll say, can you pair that with like a nice green tea or a nice warming ginger tea so that you're just balancing it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I love my smoothies, so that's why I asked that.
Well, do you know what? You could add in some cinnamon. That's what I'll tell women.
Put cinnamon on the top of it.
Yeah, so then you're still getting that warming element, or you can even grate some ginger into it so that there's still some of that. Yeah, so it's not all just cold coming in.
Gotcha. I love it. So let's talk a little bit about tampons. So what is your take on tampons? Are they good? Are they not good?
Well, from my perspective, there's 2 ways that we look at it. So I look at it from the chemical point of view. So a lot of the tampons are bleached, unfortunately. A lot of the cotton that's used for tampons has been sprayed with pesticides. So there is that potential that we're getting exposure to chemicals that aren't great through the tampon. And our vagina is a very absorbent part of our body, being like a mucous membrane. So it's very easy to absorb chemicals in that part of our body. So for women that really want to use tampons, I recommend opting for organic tampons as much as they can. We've got a couple of great brands in Australia. I'm sure that you guys have some great brands as well and options for women. And then at least you're just not getting that exposure to the chemicals. But from a Chinese medicine perspective, we really like the blood to flow unobstructed. So if someone is experiencing a lot of pain or a lot of clotting in their period, I actually recommend them to stop using tampons, because the tampon is just kind of sitting there blocking the blood flow, and it could be sitting right at the cervix and just not allowing the blood to flow. And that doesn't necessarily feel great, and it's just obstructing that smooth passage of blood. So I would recommend women to use like a menstrual cup. If they're still wanting to use something internally, a menstrual cup is great because rather than blocking the blood, it's just collecting it. So the flow isn't necessarily obstructed as much. Also, there's like period underwear and then pads if you want to. I use period underwear and menstrual cups. I found that to be really effective, and that works well for me, but some women have different preferences. But I tend to veer women away from the tampons if possible.
Yes, I agree. I definitely agree. And I actually had another lady on here the other day. She was, I think she was an OBGYN, but she was talking about how she sees a lot of patients with fertility issues and they're using tampons on a regular basis. And she said sometimes just taking that away, it helps alleviate those issues and they get pregnant. And so it's, you would never think that, like the average person would never think that a tampon could cause that much issues, but it can.
Not at all. You would never suspect that. And I also think about it, I don't think there's any research behind this, but I also think about it in terms of the microbiome of the uterus, because the cervix is opened during our period. And if there's some bacteria being created on the tampon, that could potentially travel up into the uterus. And who knows, that might be playing a role in terms of implantation and inflammation within the uterus. I don't think we know that yet, but that's something that I do keep in mind, that the microbiome is very delicate within the reproductive system, and it's a very rich area for the microbiome, and we don't want to be throwing it out as much as we can.
Right. I agree. That sounds very logical. So,
yeah.
I'm like, study? Who needs a study?
Who needs a study?
So how about lube? Tell us, kind of your favorites, healthy vagina lubes.
So I recommend a brand called Pre-Seed for my patients. Do you guys have that? Yeah.
Do. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah. So I recommend that because that's more similar to cervical mucus in the pH and the consistency, because that can be working against people sometimes in the makeup of the lube, because it might be actually killing off sperm. So if we can go for those ones that are more designed for fertility, that's what I typically recommend for my patients. But I also look at why they are needing it, because if they may be having a trouble with lubrication and things like that naturally, and they may not feel comfortable, they may not, willingly come up with that information straight away. But I always like to check that, because, that can give an indication into their estrogen levels as well and their hormonal balance. So if they're using it because they're not actually experiencing any lubrication at all, then that gives us more information in how we can best support them. So I think it's also important to understand why they're using it in the first place. But if they find they just need a little bit extra, that's okay. But making sure that if they're trying to conceive, that it's a lubricant that is conducive to sperm motility and movement.
Gotcha. And then what about if they're not trying to conceive? Would there be a different one that you would recommend?
Not particularly. I would stay with that one. Yeah.
And then what about like coconut oil or, I have clients ask me all the time, like, well, can I just use like some olive oil or some coconut oil? And I'm like, I don't know. What do you think about that?
Coconut oil, it's probably not terrible. I'm not sure about olive oil. I haven't had anyone talk to me about olive oil before. That's an interesting one.
So weird.
I'm just always very mindful of that microbiome. So I'm just always trying to not throw that out where possible, because it can really play a big role in reproductive health. So if it's minimal usage, it's okay, but I just wouldn't be using a lot of anything really. But I mean, coconut oil is like antibacterial. Mm-hmm. So hopefully that's not the worst that they could be using.
Got it. Awesome. Well, tell us a little bit more about you. How can people find you? How can they work with you? Do you have online programs or, an in-person practice?
I do. So I work from a clinic in Australia. So in Victoria, in Melbourne, I work at a clinic where people can see me in person. And then I also have an online clinic where I can work with women all around the world, which is really exciting as well. So people can work with me wherever they live. And I post on my Instagram. I try to share a lot of information there. And I do webinars and things like that are usually on my website if people want to check those out too. So I try to give lots of information to make it nice and accessible for people.
I love that. And what is your website and your Instagram?
So my website is laurencurtin.com and my Instagram is just @laurencurtin.
I love it. And we will put that in the show notes, but I always like to say it, live, so people listening, they're like, oh, okay, and they go follow you. So
amazing.
Awesome. So any final thoughts before we close out here today?
I just want to let women know that with their menstrual cycle, always pay attention to the signs that it's giving you, and that pain isn't normal and something that you need to put up with. Symptoms aren't normal, and that there is ways to bring your body back into balance, and it's not something that you just have to put up with.
I love that. I know I always say your period is your body's report card. And so if it's telling you something, you need to listen to that and kind of take notes every single month. So
absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Lauren. It was so nice to meet you and for having you on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. So lovely to meet you as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for listening, guys. And until next time, thank you for listening to the Hormone Puzzle Podcast.
Hey, hang on just 1 second before you go. I want to make sure that you are aware of all of the amazing free resources that I have for you on my website at coachkayla.com. From a fertility meal plan, a cycle syncing quick start guide, a holistic healing cookbook, as well as master classes, blog posts by me and some amazing experts in the fields of fertility, hormones, and nutrition. So many wonderful resources that will help you on your journey. And I wish there had been something like this when I was going through my 2 years of infertility, but there just wasn't. And so that's why I decided to create all of this for you. So make sure that you go and check it out and you take advantage of this plethora of support that I have provided for you. And spoiler alert, these were some of the same tricks and the same foods that I used to get myself pregnant, not once, but twice, even after my doctors said that I couldn't. So I know that these things work. Make sure you take advantage of that. And I cannot wait for you to be my next success story. So thanks, love. See you soon. Thanks for tuning in today to the Hormone Puzzle Podcast. Check out the show notes for today's episode at CoachKayla.com. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and leave a review. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you next week.